Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here this morning after such a wonderful dinner last evening. Yes, so the Pacific, it's the whole world's landmass can fit into the Pacific. Something to be aware of. That therefore poses many, many challenges, which I'll allude to. However, as I said, I go way back. So in 1981, I studied solar energy at the University of New South Wales. And when I graduated, somebody said what I was going to do. I said, one day I'll be working in the Pacific doing solar energy. Got to bear in mind in 1981, I could never work out the total production, but it had to be way less than in the megawatt range. So as soon as I left uni, I spent 2 months in the Pacific, surfing in those days. Some people think I've changed. I just know that the shirts I've still had that I've given as gifts in those days have all shrunk. It's the best way of describing it. So, always really hard to actually get accurate data on the Pacific. So this just gives you a perspective. I would not say this is 100% accurate, and particularly for New Guinea. It's rumoured it could be as high as 17 million people, and it's but it's just noticeable that New Guinea is 75% of what they call Pacific Island nations, right next door. So, but the total is, only about 14, 15 million scattered through that big area. So that poses many, many challenges. I apologise for the quality of this. The author couldn't even find the original for me when I spoke to him a few days ago. But I just wanted to show that, off-grid is still a major issue in the Pacific, particularly our neighbours in PNG, Solomon Islands and Vanuatu. So they are big target focused areas for a lot of the donors. Even the UK is now involved with funding projects in those areas at the request of the Australian government for support in this area. So, and I don't know if he's here yet, but Christian, who runs the Industry Association in New Guinea, is actually in the room this morning. He's down from Papua New Guinea. So, and here is the best up-to-date figures I could get on power demand and generation. We have a very good working relationship with what is known as the Pacific Power Association, based in Fiji. That is the association of all the utilities in the Pacific, power utilities. And so they try to have a benchmarking. So I got this a few months ago. I was trying to get an updated. So you can see when you compare it to generation around the world, total generation's only 1.3 gigawatts. However, French Polynesia's not in there. Guam, for instance, because of all the bases there, that's probably around 500, 600 megawatts by itself. And New Caledonia is a couple of hundred megawatts by itself, but still relatively small figures. There has been a lot of solar projects go in over the last 10 years by donors. One time I looked it up, I'd say potentially close to $1 billion worth of systems have gone in. And that's been some of the challenges as well. But 20 years ago is actually the first time I finally got to work in the Pacific. And part of the reason was, you'll see a person's name there, Dr. Herb Wade. He was busy in the Pacific, he's in his 80s now. He was busy in the Pacific from the early 80s in order trying to get training established. So when I started working globally, late 90s, I looked and said, well, there's not enough work for two of us in the Pacific. So I worked a lot in Africa and Asia during that period of time. It was actually Dr. Wade that contacted me in 2005 and said, could you work with me on this document called the Pacific Renewable Energy Training Initiative? It was launched on a significant date on the 11th of November 2005, Remembrance Day, was when that document was launched. And that document described how to have a training centre in the Pacific to meet the needs. So that was 20 years ago last month. It's taken 20 years. This is the building being constructed as we speak. this was probably taken 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was really hoping they could meet the 11th of November deadline that we opened it on the 20th anniversary of the report that described it, but we unfortunately haven't met that. And you look at this different ways. No offence if there was any donors in the room. For the last 20 years, all I've seen is donors decide, oh, we need to do another study to see if there's a demand for training. We need to really look to see. But meanwhile, they were spending $1 billion on putting solar in. And the companies who were installing that solar were screaming out for training. I've got myself into trouble over the years, and as people know, as you get greyer, you don't mind offending people even more. So I used to say to them, I'd go, well, if you were building a bridge and you found out the company building the bridge was actually asked for training while they were building that bridge, oh no, we'd never allow that to happen. So well, you're doing it for the solar industry. They just wouldn't spend money on training. So come after COVID years, which really caused a lot of fallback from what work we've been doing, I just had enough and I went looking for private foundations. And they found me, is the best way. So the building's been done by a private foundation in the US and we're not allowed to name them. That's in our contract. So it's going to be called the Pacific Sustainable Energy Training Centre. I had originally hoped to call it the Pacific Regional one, but USP, can't use the word regional for other reasons, includes support for 2 trainers, and we're hoping it'll be ready April, May next year. So what has happened over the last 20 years to take that time to get to that? So I was conducting training for World Bank for Off-Grid System program back in 2009 in Fiji, and a few of the people during that couple-of-week course said, when are you going to help Pacific do what's happened in Australia? So for those who aren't aware, during the 90s, there was a number of people involved in, you could call it the great-grandparent of CEC, because there was a lot of mergers of the different associations over the years. And that association, run by volunteers, no staff for the 90s, just a short period of time we had a staff person. The committees there were the ones that introduced the accreditation program in 93. Got standards being developed from the mid-90s, and they first ran the training course people would get accredited, but we then got it into, there was a certificate for in renewable energy, but it was updated late 90s, so it was more relevant to what was happening in the industry. So that's what I was asked to then do to help do in the Pacific in 2009. Obtained funding, and we got the industry association called SEAPI, Sustainable Energy Industries Association of the Pacific Island, up and running, and introduced an industry-based technician accreditation program like operates here in Australia. But that was the easy part. The hardest part then was to get it to work. And it's still not working properly today, the accreditation scheme. And I could talk for ages of why not. Training was the first issue, so therefore from 2012 onwards we had to start looking. My company, GSCS, is a private RTO here in Australia, and we've been training since 2008, if I remember correctly. So we did a lot of training in the Pacific, but that's not capacity building. That's just white people going to a country, training and leaving again. So the focus has been on how to try to get full-time training there. So we first got competency standards on training developed. We launched those in May 2012. We launched the program with the President of Fiji back in 2012. But still the training was the issue. We did online courses, we had funding for doing practical courses, but it was all still just ad hoc. It just wasn't anything. We relaunched a scheme that we do a lot of the stuff now of PPA as a joint partnership in a lot of the things. Because the utilities in the Pacific, bar 1 or 2, their conference since 2010 has had a renewables theme. They want to get off diesel. That's a big cost to the islands. So the problem has kept them being ad hoc, but I also put into context, we had a business plan that was worth $1 million. It took me 6 years to get the funding for that during this same period of time, which we did in 2018 and 19, which included doing 34 workshops in 14 countries over 2 years, 4-day workshops, developed 16 technical guidelines and put 19 training units into their framework in the Pacific. And then COVID hit. So the whole momentum just went down, unfortunately. There was this program which I've got myself into trouble for criticising for many times. So there was €6 million, which SPC, the Pacific Community, and that were given by the EU back in 2014 to set up sustainable energy training, certificate courses. I was an advisor, but nobody ever listened to me. It was run by academics more so, no offence, more so than workforce development people. There's a big, I lectured, for those who don't know it, University of New South Wales for 13 years on off-grid systems as part-time. So university and TAFE training are so different. And people don't always get that. And that was part of the problem of this project, was it was run by the Fiji Higher Education Commission. So we thought that was going to be our saviour, but it didn't turn out to be. They developed Certificate 1 to Certificate 4 courses, but they're not technical training level. We've offered to update them on that, but that's not what's really needed. There's still a lot of countries that don't even have electrical courses. So you really need people trained electrically before you get them working on solar. You know, and it's skill sets and micro-credentials. I was only having another debate yesterday morning with USP who believe everything should be a diploma. And I'm going, it's micro-credentials. It is. That's what 10, 12,000 licensed electricians here in Australia have done, short courses. The certificate courses in sustainable energy in Australia have died. It's the short courses that has the demand for people upskilling who already got skills. Local capacity. So in 2018, our company hired a person from Fiji. He's based in Fiji. He was at FNU, Fiji National University, lecturing for about 7 years. He's been a remote tutor for GSGS, so we've been building his capacity. Yeah, so I keep asking him, is he going to be one of the brain drains? Which is a major issue in the Pacific. People moving to Australia and New Zealand is a real big problem. I think his wife wants to, he doesn't want to. So that's always one of the issues. So I'm hoping he stays in Fiji because he's a very good asset, Sandip. And people from the University of New South Wales know him because they go there once a year and he runs a bit of a short training course for them. So that's our objective, local capacity building. So in 2019, after PAC-TVET failed, we said, okay, let's get all our training resources available in the Pacific. So our face-to-face material from GSGS, we can give away now to any training centre in the Pacific. We just do a licence agreement that they don't go and start selling it around the world. But that's all. Yeah, we signed agreements with Micronesians and Solomons. We actually had trainers there when I had to ring up and get out of there. I think she was on the third last flight out of Solomons before she would have been stuck there for about 18 months. So that was the effect of COVID in the Pacific, how much it closed down. We've since been working with Vanuatu, Tonga and Kiribati. In 22, we still believe it's face-to-face training, but a number of the industry said, no, Jeff, we still want to do your GSGS online and then do the practical because it suits industry people. So in part of our objective to not be the ones running training in the Pacific, we signed a licence agreement. You can do the GSGS course that's in Australia in the Pacific for half the price. You won't get the same certificate that gets your accreditation here in Australia if you do that, for obvious reasons. So we've got to try to keep the prices down. Sandip is the tutor at the moment for USP on these. We've probably had 95 people do the online courses, paid courses. They might have got funding from somebody, but they're all paid. But we have to keep fighting battles. So the International Solar Alliance is one of our latest battles. They're establishing what they're calling solar technology application resource centres. Kiribati is the first one established. Vanuatu, PNG, Fiji are the next ones. We started talking to them last year and said, Pacific Small, we're trying to get training up and done in all these countries, let's work together. Nothing really came of it. Until I wrote a big report a few months ago. When I visited the first Kiribati system that they established early this year as a training centre. It was woeful, is the best way. Cables from the inverters sitting on the ground, battery terminals not covered. I can't remember what solution was sitting beside the batteries. Those cables are 140, 50 volts, so there's no way they should be just hanging in the air like that and single core. And I was there with Kiribati because they've got a new renewable energy regulation to try to actually have standards and accredited trainers and that, installers. And I said, well, your training centre, I'd condemn it if it was it'd be turned off if it was in Australia. That did lead us having to meet with the Director General in September. The Star Seas are aiming at training, test centre, knowledge management. At that meeting, they have said we should work together. Nothing's happened still to date. I'll keep sending emails every week till it does. We've actually helped support Tonga through the Tonga Australia Support Program. They've just got $200,000 to set up the training centre properly in Tonga with equipment and hire a person to help set up their courses. As said, working with Kiribati. PNG, very frustrating, a couple of years' work. We even had an expressions of interest ready to go out this January this year. But changing the person managing that project just stopped it. Yet training in PNG is so much needed. So it's Vanuatu. I helped them secure $80,000 last year to put equipment into their training centre. The donor, when they saw them sign with Star Sea over 15 months ago, pulled out. They've still got no equipment up there. And I have been working on a solar apprenticeship program with the World Bank for FSM, Micronesia and Marshall Islands. So there's a lot happening. But the other aspect in the Pacific, training's one, standards. There's so much rubbish product in the Pacific. So finally we had a win only 2 weeks ago to get the energy officials meeting 2 weeks ago. They have urged now that senior officials start to develop in-country policies trying to get approved international standards for modules and that. Slowly try to get rid of the rubbish that's in there, which causes a lot of problems. That will hopefully go to the ministers' meeting in May in PNG next year. The association is still pretty well run by volunteers. Yeah, I know it's my company, but I've got to give it, there are other directors. Yeah, we've been the philanthropic contributor to keep SIAPI going for 15 years. Now we're working on how to make it sustainable. Just like in Australia, the association there in the 90s was all volunteer. It's now time to get it to the way that associations are. Market development funded, which is that. We have now got a full-time project officer for 12 months. I've actually got a strategic plan meeting at 11 o'clock. I've got to jump online today. We're working with financial institutions. They don't want to lend money anymore to solar systems that don't work, so we're working with them to convince them to continue to lend money, and we're helping them with documentation. We've been updating our guidelines that we developed. So yeah, I've already told a few people, officially this will be announced tomorrow, but we're actually having our first ever conference for the Industry Association in Suva at the end of March. So I'll be sending out notices tomorrow on that. And while I've been sitting down there, I secured 2 more funders this morning, sponsors. I sent out a lot of notices this morning, so the sponsors are coming in. So I'm an optimist. I don't know if over the years it's been stubbornness, stupidity or persistence to get to that, but who has heard of the Pareto principle? Well, only a few people. It's known as the 80-20 rule. Yeah, 20% of people get 80% of the work done, so on, and it has been proven in a lot of studies out of interest over the years. So I look back and go, maybe over the last 20 years we've only achieved 20% of what's needed in the Pacific. So hopefully the next 80% will be achieved in the next 5 years. I'll then be turning 72 and maybe be able to slow down a little bit more. So, yep, I made it right in the 20 minutes too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you for all the work you do. It's making a very big difference in the world. We have time for a few questions. Does anyone have a question? There's one down here at the front-ish.
Thank you. Congratulations on all the results for pushing PV solar in the area. It's always hard. I wanted to ask, in a way, just wondering if the training includes inspectors, sort of, seeing the malpractice, and then if the profits are in some way also shared by the locals, if there's a view to getting the investment from foreign to local as well, long term or so, and then weather-wise, if there's any comments on, we had the conference with the hail and the wind, if there's any difficult aspects in weather-wise in the area. Thanks.
I did have trouble hearing partly, but the first one you talked about inspectors, is that correct? Yeah, so we're actually developed a 5-day course for inspectors, and we've been running some inspections, and I'm actually heading to Solomon Islands tomorrow to do an inspection of Renew Pacific project, and I did one in Vanuatu last week, which I've still got to try to finish the report by tomorrow. So, yeah, so inspections is very critical, and that's because we learnt that in Australia. We only started doing inspections of decent value in about 2004 onwards, and we identified, with all the things we put into place, issues. I think the second one was sharing profits with the communities. The big focus is just trying to train communities up on how to maintain their systems. So we're actually working with the Alternative Technology Group in Suva, who are actually running small electrical courses for villages, and then we'll help them on the solar training. And there is a bit of a focus on women, because women don't leave the villages as much as the men. So that's really been identified, that if we are, and there is a program out of India where all they do is train grandmothers, because grandmothers don't leave a village, and you've probably got another 20 years. Reliable, that's right. So about the profits of that, no, it's just more trying to get them trained and be able to look after. But thank you.
Do we have any more questions? While I'm waiting, can I slip one in?
Yes.
So you mentioned moving towards retirement.
Slowly.
Is there somebody else who will take over your work, is my first question.
Yeah.
Second one, where is DFAT in all of this?
Right. DFAT funds, like so that TASP, Tonga, that's a DFAT funded project. So and the project we're doing in New Guinea was DFAT. My criticism of DFAT is they have these programs and they hand them over to big consultancy firms, and they leave them to run them. So when I contacted DFAT and said they've stopped the program up in New Guinea, they told me they didn't want to interfere. And I'm going, but it's needed. So we talked to Renew Pacific. That's who's funding me to, I had to harass them to allow me to do inspections of their systems. There's also DQ is about to do a $50 million program in the Pacific, but on grid connected. So we talk to them a lot, but they all do it. And there is also, some people might know there was the APTC, the Australia Pacific Training Coalition. That finished this year, and the new one is now called the Pacific Australia Skills Platform. Everything's been called platforms, I don't know why. And I've been having a lot of meetings with them because their job is to help fund training in the Pacific. So that is a DFAT funded project. I'm hoping we'll have success with them over the years.
Okay, we've time for one more question, so this will be the last one.
Hey, thanks for the chat. That's really interesting. Kind of looking at some of the talks around COP in terms of developing countries needing access to renewable technology, like the not having to go through the whole progress we've made in developed countries. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on the making technology available in a way that is simple to these developing countries. So for instance, looking here with home batteries and virtual power plants, there's a big, I think, delay happening with people not actually, consumers not having the knowledge to actually make best use of these technologies. So I was just wondering if you had any advice for academia in terms of how we're developing and innovating that actually make sure that these can be rolled out to places where there is a knowledge gap and there is a training gap.
Look, it's got to be treated country by country because of the different size grids and things like that. So the utilities themselves have already been putting a lot of storage going in. So probably the more advanced ones are Samoa, Tonga and Cook Islands. And they actually have done a lot of studies and allow so much solar, then they've got to stop because they won't stop any more spinning reserve of fossil fuel, of generators. Then they'll put more storage in, then they allow more PV. So that is happening. Some countries won't allow private solar at the moment because we've only got about a 5 megawatt grid. If all the big resorts suddenly zeroed their bills, they'd have no revenues. So there is these micro discussions of how you deal with all these issues. Fiji is probably the most advanced. There's a lot of private solar and batteries going in there already. There's 20 solar companies in Fiji. There's about 8 in Vanuatu, numerous ones in New Guinea, and that. So yeah, so in some countries, some of these countries were probably more advanced than Australia in some areas, 10 years ago, to be honest. Yeah, because they just want to get rid of diesel because it's such a big cost. The next challenge for the Pacific is then what to do with diesel in boats. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges this time. To answer your question, that I didn't quite answer, but who's going to take over from me? Well, one, Sandy. But look, I'm confident. Look, there was a number of us who were very involved with the Industry Association in the 90s as volunteers. Come the 2000s, suddenly groups like BCSC grew and suddenly had heaps of staff. Come 2010, what we were doing as volunteers in the 90s wasn't needed anymore. So I'm a firm believer that will happen in the Pacific. There's enough people there who want to get things done. My job is to get them ready to do it. Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, we'll have to wrap up there, but thank you so much, Jeff. It was extremely interesting and really inspiring. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.